The World Health Organization says the Omicron variant of COVID is spreading more quickly than the Delta variant and is causing infections in people who have already had COVID or been vaccinated. The UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson says his government is not introducing any new measures to stop the spread of Omicron, but he says he's reserving the possibility of taking more action if the number of infections and hospitalisations justifies it. Lawyers for the prosecution and defence have been summing up in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial on sex trafficking charges in New York. Ms Maxwell says the accounts of the women who accused her are not credible. And the Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai has told a reporter that she never claimed a former leading official sexually assaulted her.
The Japanese government launched a new smartphone app on Monday that allows people to display proof of vaccination at restaurants, bars, and event venues. The app is part of the government's plan to balance efforts to contain coronavirus infections with maintaining economic and social activities. Even if another state of emergency is declared in the future, the government plans to forego social distancing restrictions as long as people can present vaccination certificates.
Using a smartphone and a national identification number card, it would take only a few minutes to receive a vaccination certificate.
However, there are some issues that still need to be resolved. Some elderly people were visiting this ward office in Tokyo to get help with the app.
It's been only a year since I started using my smartphone. I'm trying to get used to it, but it is very difficult.
And errors have come to light in the nationwide vaccination record system regarding the data on which the certificate will be based. As of Friday, about 100,000 such cases had been found. Local governments have been busy making the necessary corrections. A Japanese anti-nuclear group has met government officials to discuss Japan's stance ahead of a review conference on a nuclear non-proliferation treaty. Representatives of the group visited the foreign ministry on Monday and met officials for about 1 hour. The representatives asked the government to urge nuclear powers to do more to reduce their nuclear arsenals. Officials responded that as the world's only atomic-bombed country, Japan will stress the need to spread an accurate perception about the inhumanity of nuclear weapons. But they maintained their traditional stance that Japan will not join the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons.
At first, I had some expectations for Prime Minister Kishida. Considering how diplomacy under him will proceed, the government's stance is unchanged.
The representative of the group said he sensed that the government does not understand the voices of hibakusha, atomic bomb survivors. The review conference of the parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons is to be held at the UN headquarters in New York next month. China's central bank has cut a key interest rate in another step to prop up the country's slowing economy. The People's Bank of China announced on Monday that it lowered the one-year loan prime rate from 3.85% to 3.8%. This is the first time since April last year that the bank has cut the rate, which is the benchmark for corporate loan interest rates. China's economy is losing steam with sluggish property development, sales, and personal spending. The bank lowered the ratio of reserves financial institutions must hold there on Wednesday. Lowering the ratio gives banks more cash on hand and can encourage them to lend more. Well, share prices in Tokyo have plunged across the board following the decision by China's central bank to cut the key interest rate. The benchmark Nikkei average ended on Monday at 27,937, down 607 points from Friday's close. Market sources say investors fear the rate cut may indicate the dismal state of China's economy. They say investors are also concerned about possible spreading of the Omicron variant ahead of the holiday season. Preliminary voter turnout for Hong Kong's Legislative Council election on Sunday hit a record low of 30%. Pro-Beijing candidates won all but one of the 90 seats. Many voters who support the pro-democracy camp stayed home. This was Hong Kong's first Legislative Council poll since electoral reform was carried out under what Beijing called the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong. 153 people vied for the 90 seats. Pro-democracy parties did not field any candidates because the reform set strict conditions for running. While about 10 self-described pro-democracy or centrist candidates ran, only one candidate from a centrist party secured a seat. All 20 seats directly elected by voters went to pro-Beijing candidates. People in Hong Kong spoke to NHK about why they didn't vote.
Low voter turnout is one way to express citizens' intention.
I don't think it's democracy to pick from among people already chosen by authorities.
Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam had this to say about the low turnout.
It is for the electorate to decide whether they want to come out to vote. I'm sure they have their own considerations.
Lam expressed expectation that the new Legislative Council will improve relations with the administration. Afghanistan is facing a serious humanitarian crisis. Islamic countries have agreed to establish an international fund to provide aid for the country. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation held an emergency ministerial meeting on Sunday to address the deteriorating situation in Afghanistan. Representatives from 57 countries and territories in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa took part. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan expressed concern that foreign aid and Afghan overseas assets have been frozen since the Taliban takeover in August.
The world does not act. This will be the biggest man-made crisis.
The members decided to set up a fund as soon as possible to help the Afghan people acquire food, as 60% of the population is facing shortages amid the economic turmoil. The fund will also help pay the salaries of public servants and teachers who remain unpaid. A Japanese billionaire is back on Earth after a 12-day journey to space. Maezawa Yusaku landed on a field in Kazakhstan on Monday. Maezawa became the first private citizen from Japan to visit the International Space Station. The businessman performed tricks for his social media followers during the stay, including making tea in zero gravity. He described the experience to NHK with a single word: breathtaking. 2021 has marked the beginning of a new era of commercial space travel as 29 civilians took flights. More flights are planned for next year and beyond, with U.S. and Russian companies now leading a global space race. Meanwhile, Japan's latest roadmap for space development includes a new manned lunar rover. The policy document says the nation's space agency will partner with companies that make earthbound vehicles. Astronauts riding the rover would send back images like these. It's part of a U.S. project to further explore the moon's surface. Other proposed plans include a scheme to generate solar power in space. A probe set for a fiscal 2024 launch would study a Martian moon. And there's a plan for the Air Self-Defense Force to monitor space junk. Japan's strategic headquarters for space development could finalize the roadmap before the new year.